Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
We have 3 from the high school. We have 2 from Rock. We have 3 from Union Elementary. It's 6:31. I'm going to call the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union Board to order. Today is June 23rd, and we will get a wiggle on here. Adjustments to the agenda. What do we have, Chris? Anything?
No, I don't have any other adjustments. I see that we had Molly's request for transportation, but we were able to squeeze it in there.
Okay. Anyone else? Priscilla?
Just have a question. I know it was in the minutes for last time on the McKinney-Vento, and I mentioned that. It wasn't put on here, but we haven't had a chance to read it because it should have been put out to the members. So do we want to just put that off till next time?
I'm going to defer to Chris Pratt on that, Priscilla, because it's entirely possible that administration may have that covered. Let's find out.
Well, I think the what Priscilla's referring to is the policy committee looked at the McKinney-Vento and they wanted to bring it to the board for approval. And so I would think that it didn't go on the agenda tonight. So, I mean, I would leave it up to the chair of the committee, which is Priscilla, whether or not she wants to bring it in front of the SU committee tonight.
I think since we haven't had a chance to read it as a board, that we have to put it off, but I'm not sure how that works. So that's why I'm asking the question, because it was on the minutes from the 26th that it was going to be brought tonight.
I think we can read it.
David, weigh in.
We can't vote.
No, it has to come 2 meetings at least. I didn't know whether it was 2 meetings or 3 meetings, but it has to.
Well,
So do we want to just get it out and do the next 2 meetings?
taking note, Priscilla, that we are very likely to meet again on July 14, as well as our regular meeting of July 28th. I think we can add it to a 14th agenda and get it done on time. Would that work?
That works for me.
Okay. I'm going to take note of the fact that we have some other members in the room, and I'll get you just a moment, Jason. I'm seeing Megan and Ginger and Molly. And if you're watching at home, Molly Bannock is Union High School. Megan Applegate is a Rockingham district, and heaven help me, Ginger, pronounce your last name for me so I don't get it wrong on the first try.
Nobody can pronounce it. It's Majowski.
Majowski. Thank you so much. Okay,
Yeah,
Jason.
David, I'd like to, for an adjustment, I'd like to add on to Molly's transportation, if I could talk about a safety issue with transportation.
Well, we will be under transportation. I see no reason why we can't do that.
Thank you.
We're simply going to consider that transportation, Jason. So if I need a reminder when we get there, you could be my reminder. We do have one other thing that I think we should clarify on this agenda. It is item 10 is executive session with action likely to follow. That action likely to follow is actually negotiations, I think. And let us just state here for the record and to the public that the action likely to follow executive session would involve negotiations. So we'll see what happens when we get there. Anyone else? Okay, communication and public comment. Do we have any, Chris? All right. Anyone else? Chris Pratt, are you in the room?
Yeah, no, we have nothing in public comment. Let me just check it one more time. No, we do not.
Okay. I would like to entertain a motion on the minutes of May 12. Can I have a motion, please? I can only see 3 voting members' faces, so I'm going to ask Priscilla if you would be willing to make a motion, which I realize may be subject to correction. Thank you for that. And how about a second, Brenda? Would you mind? We operate under Robert's rules for small boards, but it has been custom here at this board. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes of May 14. Are there any corrections to
12.
those minutes?
12.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'm getting a month ahead of myself here with much anticipation about policy, McKinney-Vento. Okay, do we have any corrections to those minutes? Oh, not okay. Not hearing any corrections.
Yeah, David,
Yes, Priscilla.
yes, I have corrections. I think you have to add Jessa to the members in attendance. I have her listed on my notes as being there, and Jack should be under others in attendance.
All right. Are there any objections to those corrections? All right, then we will vote the amended minutes, corrected minutes, and I will roll call us. Priscilla.
Aye, with corrections, yes.
Yes. Jason Terry.
Yes.
Jessa.
Yes,
Cheryl.
Yes.
Jack.
Sure.
Wonderful. Brenda.
Yes.
Deb.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, the minutes are approved as corrected. Reports, transportation. Chris, you are aware that we do have a question from Jason Terry, but why don't you start us off? I think Molly clarified what she wanted to know about transportation, so that'd be a good place to begin.
Yeah, sure. So Molly was inquiring about, seems like each year where the board has been asked to add a bus to the fleet or update one. And right now we have 10 buses that are 5 years or newer and 7 buses that are older than 2017. And last year, the board was asked to replace one of the smaller buses, but we used some ESSER 1 money to replace that vehicle. So we're not going to be asking the board to update or add any buses to the fleet we currently have. In addition to that, right now, I mean, you just got the normal wear and tear on buses, inspections and tires and stuff like that. So we're in pretty good shape right now, and we won't be going to the board asking for any purchasing or buses or anything like that. We were able to get that resolved with some ESSER 1 money. So I hope that answers your question, Molly.
Think we're in good shape, Chris?
Yeah, bus wise, we're in good shape.
Thank you.
I'm in good shape, David. I just really wanted to just get an update.
Okay. Sounds like we get a pass from the superintendent, and it sounds like we get a pass from the high school chair. Anyone have any other questions or comment? If not, then I'm going to recognize Jason Terry. And before you get going, Jason, I just want to let the rest of the board know that correspondence between you and Deb has been shared with me, and I understand that there is a question about student safety. And so with that preamble, let's get going here, Jason, if you're ready.
Yep, thank you. So I just want to evaluate and take a look at, there is a safety issue potentially near the central school. There's a stairway that goes up, and kids have to walk down those stairs in the wintertime. And I checked it out myself, and today, and it could be pretty sketchy, especially since it's not maintained during the wintertime. And there's been, kids have fallen and things like that. So I think it's important that we evaluate how the kids get picked up. And, a simple solution that was brought up was right at the bottom of Griswold Drive on Taylor Street. We can make that a bus stop. I don't think the buses are overcrowded. Kids won't miss a bus, and overall kids will be much safer. So I think that's a good idea And I just want to evaluate it and see if we can make that happen for the beginning of school year next year. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Deb, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just that, I know that the argument is the less than a mile away from the school, has been the constant argument about that. But because of scrapes and bruises and constant things, because it's not getting taken care of. And the town highway has said, oh, the school's supposed to maintain that. And the school says town highway is supposed to maintain that. And it doesn't matter. Whoever's supposed to maintain it, they have to go to school at 8. And after a snowstorm, it's not getting maintained. So it's constantly snowed. It's constantly iced on. Ice is probably worse than anything else in the winter, mainly in the winter time. Not to mention that it's kind of a sketchy area anyway. Even if they walked around, that would put them at more than a mile, and going down through Blake and Burt Street, that area does not have sidewalk the entire length of it, which means then you're making kids go into the street to walk to school. And I want to make sure that I covered this point because some will say, well, that's their alternative. I know there aren't a lot of kids living up on the perch, which is what they call the streets up above the elementary school. But the reality is all the kids on Griswold Drive get a bus, and it comes down to the bottom where Taylor meets those other streets and Griswold Drive. There is no reason why the bus, which I presume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is not full. So there isn't any reason why those kids can't be picked up there, particularly in the winter. Maybe the only easy way to do it is to increase the entire route for the year. But at least in the winter, when it is frightening, that parents actually either have to drive their kids if they can, or make them walk. And when they walk, they have accidents. And I've seen pictures of those accidents. I'd like that to stop as a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. I have a hand from Jack. Jack, you're recognized.
Thanks. I'm completely ignorant of the situation. Is this is a concern that the buses aren't getting to kids, or is it an issue that the area where the kids are being picked up is unsafe?
The kids are less than a mile away from the school. Based upon that, they don't get a bus ride at this point, and all kids living up on those streets up above the elementary school are required to walk to school. They don't get the advantage of the bus on Griswold Drive that comes down the hill right near their homes. They are supposed to walk. Because of that, bus doesn't stop for them, and they have no access to the bus. They're required to walk, and they get injured in the wintertime. So it's not a bus deficiency, it's they needed to be added to the route. That's my recommendation.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks, Jack. Jess, I have your hand. You're recognized.
Yeah, I used to live on Griswold Drive, and yeah, walking down there is not great. But you had mentioned putting the bus stop right at the corner there with Griswold and Taylor. And that's probably not a great place to have a bus stop, because if you come up from Burt Street on that back street, it's like a 90-degree turn almost. There's not a lot of time to see buses and kids stopped if it's right at that intersection. I don't know if the bus can do like a lap around that street in the front or something, but I'm all for picking them up. I didn't even think the stairs were still there, but I just don't know if we as a board need to decide on a place, maybe ask the PD what they think or something.
Jess, I'm going to suggest that what we do is ask administration to look into the situation and give us a response at least before we reopen school. If there are any other questions or comments, I'd like to hear them before we move on.
David, this is Chris. So I can understand what everyone's saying and stuff. Right now, with the way the buses are and what we spend on buses and transportation, none of the routes have been decided for next year. We worked this whole entire year to take a look at routes and where the kids are being picked up, the side roads some of these buses are on. We're taking in consideration that I want buses full, but at the same token, I don't want kids on the bus more than an hour. I don't anticipate that we're going to lessen the radius of within a mile of the school to pick kids up. I mean, transportation is one of the most expensive things in the budget. We're trying to make it more efficient, but no decisions have been made in regards to where the stops will be. All I can say is that we want full buses, and we're consolidating stops, and we're consolidating routes, and that's something we're going to be working on. We'll continue to work on this summer. So when we have more information, the board will be presented with it.
Thank you, Chris. Anything else here? All right, in that case, Chris, while you're still unmuted, let's talk about ESSER and what the ed recovery teams are doing.
Sure. So I put some information together for you. So I'm just gonna share my screen. So be right with you.
David, while Chris is looking that up, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In order to make sure that this action is investigated, because of course, if your bus director does same old, this won't get covered. Should the SU consider making a motion to ask that be done for those streets?
I'm going to give you a qualified response, Deb. And the qualified response is this: we generally don't take action on unwarmed items. And I'm going to query the board, and I will roll call the board and see if the board is in fact comfortable with taking that kind of action. So Chris, with your forbearance here, let me quickly poll and see if this is something that the board wishes to vote on. And if we do vote on it, Deb, I'm going to ask you as the putative or presumed motion maker that you would put a date certain on it that would not be any later than our meeting in August. Okay. All right. I have your sense, Deb. Brenda Farkas, do you wish to vote on this?
And what exactly are we voting on?
We would be directing administration to come back to this board by a date certain with a response on this situation involving student safety, or potential situation involving student safety.
Okay, so yeah.
Okay, well, all right. We haven't got there to the vote, but yes, thank you for that. Priscilla, you okay with this?
I would like to, I don't think we need to vote on it, but I would like to encourage Chris to come back with information in July so that if we do need to vote on it, that we have the time to look at it and then vote on it. Also, he should take into account the distance that would be a safe route for the children to travel, because coming down those stairs, we've just been told is not safe, and going out around is going to be more than the mile. So that should be the consideration when he's looking at what children need to ride the bus.
Okay, I have a sense of your response here. Jason Terry, a yes or no on a vote?
Yes.
Okay. Jessa West Clark?
I'm going to say no. Have it on the record that we brought this issue up for the superintendent when he comes back with bus information later in the summer. But I would like the transportation department to also clarify if we are willing or deciding to pick up students within the radius if there's no sidewalk, because that whole upper terrace, there is no way down it to Atkinson Street without going on an area where there is no sidewalks. And that would be a consideration that's a little bit further even than that particular neighborhood.
Okay.
So like a policy.
I have you, Jessa. Cheryl?
I think I would say no also, based on what Priscilla and perhaps Jessa have just said, that I think we need to get more information. I don't think we need to take a vote on this right now.
Jack? Jack, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I get the issue. I think that when we make policies, we shouldn't make it about a stop at a particular place. It should be broader than that. But I want to hear more, and I think we should be. We want to bring this up when the routes are brought before us in the expectation that we approve the routes, because that's something we are supposed to do as part of our purview. And if this isn't addressed, I'm not going to approve the routes. I don't know about the rest of you. And so let's do that.
Okay, thank you. And I have been keeping track. The sentiment is not to make a motion on it, but I think that we can put this on the July agenda and revisit the topic. And if we feel that the board needs to take decisive action, we can do that. I will remind people that really we're talking about an administrative prerogative here. And I think it's far better to express concern to the superintendent and let him work on it than it is for us to be overly prescriptive, because that does edge toward what's referred to as micromanagement. So I think we have a clear sense of where the board is here. Okay, so Chris, sorry to hold you up on that. Let's talk about Esther and the recovery teams.
All right, so let me just share my screen. Everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. So tonight's report is going to be a combination of a couple different things. First, I'm going to start off with giving everyone an update in regards to the work that the recovery team has been doing. And this is a recovery team that's made up of 35 to 40 people, so we'll get into that. And then we'll follow by that, I'll start getting into some of the data that the recovery team has been looking at to create their recovery plan. And so I will be providing all of you with a hard copy of this presentation, so you do not have to worry about all the number and the data that I'll be throwing at you. I will follow this up with an email to all of you. So on that note, why don't we get started? So beginning in May of 2021, the recovery team of the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union started the process of creating our strategic plan for a post-pandemic support for highly effective teaching and learning. I assembled our team to include representation from the community, school boards, teachers, and administrators who have been working closely through a process designed to provide a vision for the immediate and long-term future to ensure all students are graduate and college career ready. What you see in front of you are the times we've already met. As you can notice, our next and hopefully, as far as planning for the recovery team, session 5 will be tomorrow night. Just to give some of you guys an update in regards to the recovery team, it's more of a strategic team, and I'm hoping that all these individuals will continue to work with me and my administrators over the 21-22 school year, because it's really about a campaign, and we want to keep this process very transparent with everyone involved, community included, board members, because when we do start spending the money, ESSER money that we're talking about that comes from the feds and trickles down to the state, is that we want to make sure that we're using this plan to guide us and that we're sharing the work that we're doing. We're getting input from everybody involved. But some people have asked me, when do we start spending this money? Well, there is no definite date when we start spending this money. There's a multi-tiered approval process that we have to go through with the state. And so once we do start spending that money, it's this plan is going to drive us in the conversations that we have and we continue to have throughout the school year. So when we start spending the money, the only money that's been spent so far for SUs around the state is anyone like us who have a summer program that we're improving or starting. So that's the only money that's been spent so far. We will continue to work with everybody in regards to as programs continue to develop. So the recovery plan that we've been working on, it's broken up into 3 domains, and these 3 domains, with the work we've been doing over the weeks, is that each person is broken into a different group, and that group represents board members and administrators and teachers and community members. We're all broken up into well-represented domains, and these are the 3 domains that we have here: social and emotional, mental health and well-being, student engagement and truancy, academic achievement and success. And these are all the areas where we have to address in the recovery plan that we submit to the state. So as we've been doing this work, I've been filtering it to Dr. Carey, our assistant superintendent. And what she's been doing is that she's been putting our work into the format that's needed to go to the state. So we're in pretty good shape. We keep filtering that. And then once that plan is complete, sharing that with everybody. Like I said, we want this to be a transparent process, but this is kind of what the foundation is of the work that the team's been doing. And so this is the stage process, the 5-stage process that was designed by Focus Schools, the company that we're working with, and illustrate the process that the recovery team has followed to develop our strategic plan. Each step has had several embedded actions to ensure that our work remained targeted and on the established schedule that we need. So you can see right here, I think we just finished up on step 3 and we'll be moving on to step 4. Like I said, this process is just beginning. This is more of a campaign and a strategic plan process that we want everyone involved in. And we're just using the process to help us create the recovery plan for the state. So let's get into some of the data that we've been looking at as a team and as administrators. And we're going to look at first is measures of academic progress, which is our local assessment data. The SBAC is the state assessment data that we use for math and literacy. And so those are the 2 areas we're going to be looking at, math and literacy. And we'll also look at individual schools in the maths, and then we'll just look at the SU level for SBAC. So the vision of WNESU community is to provide equitable learning opportunities for all students and families. And so the unification and practices and equity of these opportunities will reduce the loss of learning when students transition from school to school and provide equitable opportunities for all families and supports no matter what school they're going to, because it is about equity. So when we look at that, if we get into, what does that mean for each school? Well, for the high school, is that the high school, in regards to measures, the 9th grade met 40% of their students met the projected growth winter 20 to winter 2021. And those are the dates we're going to be looking at for all the schools. It starts in winter 20 and we measured it until winter 2021. So at the high school, 40% of the 9th graders met that growth for mathematics, maps. For the middle school, these are what we have for score. The student growth reports for Bella Falls Middle School shows that in math, the observed growth did not meet the grade level norms for projected growth in grades 5, 6, and 7. So grade 5, 21%, grade 6, 26%, grade 7, 29%, and grade 8, 55%. Central school, 20% of the students in grade 1 met projected growth for the time frame that we're looking at, winter to 20 to winter 21, 33% in grade 2, 17% in grade 3, and 12% in grade 4. Athens Grafton, the student count was too low to use data to project the growth for maps, except for in grade 4, in which 35% of the projected proficiencies as set by the maths national norm. The national norm is it's just as I said, it's probably one of the largest norm set tests in the nation that we use it measures our students against other kids in the nation during the same time periods. So it's a huge area that we're looking at in regards to measuring it to other kids around the nation. And it's just like SBAC, you got to be careful of reporting out on students, because if it's a low number of students in the grade, they can be identified through that. So that's why Athens Grafton, except for grade 4, it's unreportable. Saxon's River in grade 1, 20% met the norms. In grades 2, 23, in grades 3, 6, and then in grades 4, we didn't have any students. Westminster School, 56 of the students in grade 1 met the projected proficiency, and then going down the list, 55 for grade 2, 23 for grade 3, 4 for 4, 43% for grade 5, and 50% in grade 6 have met the norms. That was for math. So moving on to literacy. For the high school, same thing with the high school in language arts, a little over 40%, of grade students in grade 9, once again, met the proficiency for English language arts. It was around the similar it was around 40% for the math. I think it was just a little under 40% for the math, and it was a little over 40% for the English language arts for the high school. For the middle school, as you can see here, looking at language arts, grade 5 was 26%, grade 6, 57%, grade 7 was 41%, and grade 8, 59%. As you can already start to see is that the scores in the local assessment were much better in English language arts as it was in math. And that's typical nationwide and statewide, that students tend to do better in ELA than they do in math. For central school, and these are the numbers that we have: 4% grade 1, 26 for grade 2, 22 for grade 3, and 47 for grade 4. Athens Grafton, grade 4, like I said, that's the, and if you remember in math, they were 35%. And it's interesting here, grade 4, they were 30% of students met the projected growth for English language arts. They kind of flipped it. It was a little different, 35 in math, and now they had 30% in ELA. Saxton's River, none of the students met the projected growth in math, in the maths, 31% in grade 2, 22% in grade 3, and 25% in grade 4. Westminster, 56% of the students in grade 1, then it goes 33 grade 2, 38 grade 3, 42 in grade 4, 48 in grade 5, and 33% in grade 6 met the projected growth. Okay, so now we get into a more broader look at, this is the state Smarter Balance testing that we all have to do in math. And we really didn't dig into each individual school, but we did take it from an SU level. And so when I start talking about level 3 and 4, this is what they're talking about. Proficiency is up near level 3 and 4. And then once you get to level 2 is where the kind of scores, if you were to like it, 1 is not good, level 4 is proficient. So level 3 and 4 on the Smarter Balance assessment, like I said, this is SU-wide. This is not based on each individual school. You have 29.9% in grade 3, 16.3 and 4, 10.1 and 5, 5.6 in grade 6, 18.1 in grade 7, and 19.4 in grade 8. And that was math. So in literacy, same thing. This is just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Levels 3 and 4, which is on the higher end, which is proficient or exceeds. These are the numbers we have for the same grade levels. So roughly you got 40 grade 3, 32 in grade 4. I guess if you're rounding up, you get 48 for grade 5, 49 for 6, 39 for 7, and 46 for grade 8. So that's the data that we've been looking at as a recovery team. And we continue to look at this data because this is just assessments that we do throughout the year, 3-4 times a year. This doesn't include the benchmark assessments that we do a lot of in Wyndham Northeast. And what benchmark assessments are that is if a student's struggling, we're not going to wait for these assessments. These are local assessments that we do to measure the kid, quick assessments to see if what we're doing is working with the students or not. And all of our teachers do a great job of benchmark assessments. Not all SUs and schools do benchmark assessments, but our teachers here do a fantastic job in the administration about not waiting till the big test to see if the kids are succeeding or not. It's a constant process. So I'm just going to finish up in regards to this. This is the SWOT analysis that we've been working on as a recovery team. And then when you looked at those 5 tiers that we've been working on and you break it into the domain groups, these are the areas that when we were kind of pulled as a group, we came up as the priority. And, so our top priority, looking at all the information we have, is academic achievement and success. And so priority identified for leadership action. So if you just take a quick look at this, we came up with 9 of them, 1 being our greatest priority, 9 being not that it's not important, but when you pulled all the people, 35, 40 people that we have on the recovery team, this is what we came up with as a priority for our SU and district. So it was good conversation. It was very surprising that I think a lot of it we didn't expect. We thought some things to be higher and some things to be lower, but we're focused right now on the top 3 here as of today. And so you have academic achievement and success. Remember, these are the different domains, the 3 different domains that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And so why is it a priority identified? Inconsistent and non-inclusive learning opportunities. 2, for academic achievement and success. Another one was lack of support and lack of clarity on which supports are needed for our learners. And social emotional learning and mental health and well-being, which a lot of us thought that would be up at the 1. It's still 3 and it's up pretty high, but still. And that was isolation, lack of connections, and ability to do the things we've always done. That's directly related to, all these are directly related to COVID. So we got some great data here that we use to provide this list. And, this is going to be a very fluid process, but I just wanted to share all of this stuff with all of you. And I want to thank you for listening. And like I said, I will send this presentation out to all board members so you have the specific data. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I have a hand from
Everybody,
Jess. Okay. I have a hand from Jessa, and Jessa, I'm going to recognize you in just a moment. I realize that it's probably a fairly common perception that we're going to have a lot to talk about in terms of the 2021 academic year. And I'm hoping, Jessa, that you'll get us started here by perhaps drawing some of those questions out. And I am going to remind the board that if you've been paying attention to the agenda, and it's a good argument that your chair hasn't, which I'll explain in a moment, we are going to revisit a fair amount of this discussion on the 14th, where I'm very hopeful we can devote virtually all of the meeting to it. So I think the questions should flow freely, but I'm going to caution the board that we should anticipate hearing those answers answered more thoroughly and thoughtfully when we get back together on the 14th of July. Now, I want to tell you why I say the chair has not been paying attention to his own agenda, and that's because I see that we have inadvertently left off an update on the Act 173 coalition's work. And when we get done with this item, if there are no objections, and I will ask again when we get there, I would like to see if we can't do something. We are fortunate because we also have the executive director of the coalition in the room. Okay, so Jessa, what's your question or observation?
So it's fairly brief because I don't think we can really ask questions about the substance of it till we have a chance to go over ourselves. But Chris, you switched terminology at one point. Is for the elementary grades, are you measuring percent of students reaching proficiency or the percent of students that were reaching their projected growth? Because I know those two things are different.
Yeah, with the numbers you saw reporting out, the percentages are the amount of kids who met the projected growth. So, in some cases you had 26, we only hit 26% of the kids meeting projected growth. So the rest of the kids didn't. So, and
the projected growth is an individual number for each child, right? And it doesn't necessarily indicate proficiency, but it's their expected level.
No, it's based on the testing norms in regards to what it's expected from, it varies from local assessment to state assessment because the national norms for our local assessment, the maps, it's a much, it's just as big really as SBAC, but no, it's based on their norms. It's our local assessment is more tied to local growth, but that's when we get into the benchmarks assessment with kids that I spoke about.
Follow up, Jessa?
I guess if you could just put some of that in the email, that would be great, just so we make sure everybody's working on the same assumptions.
Yep,
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessa. Cheryl, I have your hand.
Right, thank you. I think related to Jess's question, Chris, I'd really like to know really where the students are against the anticipated proficiency. What is it that we expect for students at each of those levels? You just talked about what their projected growth was, but how do they measure really against what we think kids at that age ought to be knowing? And so please add to that in whatever you send out to folks. I think that's also a little bit unclear. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Additional questions? Anyone else? Priscilla.
Yes, Chris, I know you got an extension to turn the report into the state. When is the deadline for the new deadline for turning this report in?
I believe it's around the 24th is what we anticipated. But like I said in the presentation, we keep feeding as we do the work as the recovery team. I'm feeding that information to Dr. Carey, and she's been submitted to the state. So we're in pretty good shape right now. We have the meeting tomorrow that we have to brush up a few things, and as soon as we're done with that meeting, I'll give the rest of it to Dr. Carey. She'll put it into the format for the state. So we should be all set.
Okay, and we will have this data tomorrow, because some of this data, I'm on the academic group, and I know I haven't seen a lot of this data that you just presented. I was thinking that the students were doing better than what I just saw, and I think our whole group was, because they were saying that certain groups were higher percentage than what I just saw, I believe. So I'm just hoping we'll have all that data tomorrow.
Yeah, the SBAC, well, that data we're working with, will you have all that data tomorrow? It's possible, but I don't think so, because we're still breaking it down, because SBAC data this year, the state pretty much said, they don't want to put much in the SBAC testing. So, unless parents specifically request it, the SBAC data is not going home because it's really not a true measure of how the kids were doing from winter 20 to winter 21. It's more about the MAPS testing that we do ourselves. It's skewed a little bit, but we still have to take into consideration. The bottom line is that whatever this data, whatever data we have, the bottom line is kids lost ground. Whether it's 2% they lost ground or 50% they lost ground, the bottom line is that we have to find a way to have them make up that ground that they had and stuff. So that data, the data I shared with you is the same, I think, data that Dr. Carey shared a while ago with the board, but I can resend that out again to everybody in regards to where I pulled it from.
Thank you.
Thanks, Priscilla. Cheryl.
Right, to what the point that Chris just made, the bottom line, you just said, Chris, the bottom line is that the students have lost ground. I'm not sure the evidence is clear that all students have lost ground. I'd like to know where the students are who are involved in the Virtual Learning Academy. Where are their test scores in this mix? And I am sure that there are some students who in this last 18 months who have been accommodated through a variety of means, who are a part of our public school system, are scoring better than the proficiency scores that we're talking about here. So I don't actually think it's accurate to generalize to say that all students have lost ground. And I think we need a better picture of the whole of all of the kids. I would just ask for that additional data.
No, we're not saying that all students lost ground. And the data that I showed you guys, it shows, 40%, what the percentages I was showing you were the kids who gained ground. It wasn't the kids who lost ground. So you have, 30% of third graders who were proficient or exceeded expectations. So we're not saying all kids lost ground, but the bottom line is, if you look at how the state is measuring it, whether it's the local assessment or the state assessment, we had more kids lose ground than gain ground or maintain ground. That's the bottom line of the data that I showed you guys tonight. I showed you the percentages that kids were succeeding at levels 3 and 4. And so they weren't the majority, as you could see by the percentages we were seeing. We did have kids that were successful.
Right, that's helpful. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Jack, Briar.
I stepped away for about 10 seconds, so I may have missed a slide, but I'm sorry. These data points are useful, but they'd be even more useful. Did we talk about what the state average losses and gains were? Because I missed that if we did, and I appreciate knowing how we did relative to these expectations. But the whole state went through this process. I'm assuming that the student body as a whole across the state had losses and gains, and we can only benchmark ourselves against not the expectations in a normal school year, but benchmark ourselves against what the state did on average. And I did that come up in our discussions while I went and got my coffee, or did I miss that?
Somewhat. The state's really telling us not to put a lot into the state assessments this year because of everything that schools went through of, opening, closing, going remote. So we're relying more on our local assessments and our benchmark assessments. It's like I was telling Cheryl, the numbers that I showed you tonight were the kids that were met expectations or exceeded, the 3 and the 4s. They weren't the majority. So the minority, they were the minority of kids who either stayed their ground or improved.
Appreciating that. I guess my point simply was this: if there was every year to grade on a curve, to use an educational term, this might have been it. And I think that we can feel like we didn't do as well as we would like, but it would be really helpful to know if we did as well or better or worse than our peers across the state, who on average did all sorts of different things, but there's an average there. And I'd it would be really nice to have a sense as to how we measured up against our peers, not against the absolute ideal, because we kind of knew going into this that we were going to take a bath in terms of our metrics. But
anyone who's interested, you can go on to the AOE's website and look at the comparative data that they have there as well. But like I said, as an administrative team, we're looking more at the local assessments and knowing that the overall, this is where we have to get kids caught up, because the kids who lost ground are the majority, not the minority.
Sure, yeah. All right.
Thank you. Go ahead, Priscilla.
Chris, do we also have a way of looking at how they did like in a normal year last year? Not last year, because we we were testing probably before the pandemic hit, or maybe the year before, so that we know what kind of gains have happened in the past, just as a comparison thing. And I know you're saying the state is not looking at this year as being something that we should be expecting these kinds of things. But knowing what we've done in the past would give us some idea of what, how it really has impacted our schools. And I know it has, but it would give us a better opportunity to see it.
it's really difficult to gauge that because, you know, SBACs didn't take place last year. So it really throws everything off. That's why I said, you know, we still did our MAPS testing, you know, as much as we could last year. So that's more reliable than the state data, because now if you're going to compare data, you're going to have to do it with a 2-year separation of the span with SBAC. So we've been really relying on the MAPS data and the benchmark assessments that we're doing with students. So it's really difficult. You know, we've never experienced anything like this before. So how we actually look at the data, I think the bigger picture is knowing, like we've been doing with the recovery team, is coming up with where we feel that we need to address the most important issues. And the data that we have, hopefully, because like I said, this team's going to continue its work all through 21, 22. And then hopefully by doing that, like I said, it's a fluid process, we're able to get more better hardline data so we can make adjustments if we need to our plan of action, strategic plan, whatever you want to call it, because it's really tough to measure that data when you have a year in between, but we don't have state testing data.
Okay, but giving me the data 2 years ago would tell me what kind of progress our students were making at that point. And it would be at least beneficial to know what kind of progress they were making then compared with what types of progress they are made this year. So that's what I'm asking, if we can get that data.
We can try, but you know, you have to look at the same cohorts, and we have such a large transient population. It could skew those numbers as well. That's what makes it difficult.
It could some, I understand, but at least it would give us a start. It would give us something to see what kind of progress our teachers are able to get from their students in 1 year. And yes, we have transit, but we also have, you know, the same types of students coming in. So you're dealing with the same kind of populations all the time. So it would at least give us some idea.
Right, and I think the idea that we haven't, because we know we're dealing with the same population of students every time. That's why I think you saw, and the recovery team, why the top 3 things filtered out, you know, to the top as they did, because we know we have a large low socioeconomic, and we have also a transient population. So that's why those top 3 things risen to the top, even if we don't have reliable data because of the COVID pandemic and everything. It doesn't mean we can't understand where our kids and what our kids need based on the small SU we have. And I think that's what we're doing. But it's like I said, we're going to be working on this all through 21, 22. This is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And we're going to have to continue to look at this data, because as the next year goes on, we're going to have plenty of opportunity to continue to dig into the data that's more accurate than what we're trying to do now and base decisions on now.
Okay, so you're going to provide the data from 2 years ago, so we have the comparison, right?
No, I don't know if I'm gonna provide data from 2 years ago. I want to focus on the data moving forward. I don't think that
I'd like to see the data from 2 years ago.
Let me please finish. My 27 years in education doesn't show that going back 2 years of looking at data when you're living in a transient population, in my experience, is very similar to the inner schools. That's not going to help us move forward. We got to base it on the most current data we have. If you want to see the data, you can go into the AOE and take a look at it. Absolutely. But we're spending our time in creating new data and new systems and new programs. So we're dealing with every kid as an individual, not a cohort of students. And I think that's what it's all about. We have such a small SU. There's no reason we can't look into each individual kid's, how they're doing in their growth, rather than having to go back 2 years and try to figure that out. I want to work with new data, not old data, and work with each individual kid.
Priscilla, I have an understanding of what you're asking for. So maybe this is a discussion you and I can have offline. And I
think so. That's fine. He answered. Thank you.
Okay, good. And I would also now like to recognize Cheryl, and this may be the last comment here on this topic before we keep moving. So let's see where we're at. Okay, Cheryl.
Right, thank you. I think for the public listening to this, since we have Fact TV here as well, you know, all of this is so important. and we're talking about the impact on children and families from this last 18 months of the pandemic. We're also talking about an infusion of federal dollars, and that's what people are talking about. And when Chris refers to the ESSER funding, it's federal funding that's coming in to assist to help children and families and the whole community recover from all of this. So we're diving in to try to figure out where are the best places to make support available. And Priscilla's question has to do with where are we and where were we, and how can we really measure the impacts of all of this? But the point of it is to try to figure out where are the best places to provide support and to make that available. I just wanted to make a comment to put all of this in context. So thank you, David, and thanks everybody for all this discussion.
All right. And I think we will have a more substantive and possibly better informed discussion when we come back in July on this. So once again, thanks, Chris, for the presentation. Certainly is an eye opener. And I would encourage everyone who's here tonight, and I realize we have at least 3 board members from other boards who don't have the vote, but we really do want your input. I'm speaking specifically to Megan, Ginger, and Molly on this. So by golly, if you have a question or comment to make, I would urge you to make those comments or ask those questions. I was going to move us down to reports item C, which unfortunately is not on the agenda, but I'm hoping that since it's simply a report that the board will allow it. I want to let the board know, which you may already know, which is that on June 7, Governor Scott did sign S13, which deals with how we are going to look at the student weighting formulas, which were an outcome of Act 173. A lot of boards in the state realize that the large special ed population districts were looking at very significant revenue shortfalls that would be made up locally here in Wyndham Northeast, around $1 million a year across the 4 towns is a reasonable placeholder for that. What S13 did was, among other things, was established a task force of House and Senate reps to come back to the legislature with recommendation on that. In just a moment or two, I'm going to, once again, with the board's permission, ask to hear from Mark Schaber, who is in the Dover district as a board member and also is the executive director of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity and is far better read in on developments than I am. But before I ask Mark if he's willing to talk to us, I do want to just say, and this is very much relevant to this discussion right here, that I asked Molly to put an agenda item on the high school agenda, which would allow me to use the high school's letterhead to solicit funding for the coalition. The next time we meet, we'll make a similar request to this board. And what I want you to understand is there have been relatively few individuals and boards who have carried a very heavy financial load to get us where we are now. And I love reminding people that you go back 6 or 8 weeks, and our Senate President Pro Tem Becky Ballant from Brattleboro was adamant that there was going to be no action taken on the student weighting formulas this year. And yet here we are actually about to have substantive action taken over the summer by that task force. And I will point out that the legislation passed both houses unanimously. So the legislature's gotten religion, and it's up to us to make sure that we can keep their noses to the grindstone. So with that very lengthy introduction, Mark, if you're ready, can you tell us what the coalition is doing and what it needs to do to keep us on track?
Well, thank you, David. I am Mark Schauber. I live in Dover. I'm a member of the River Valleys Unified School District School Board and the executive director of the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity, as David said. I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add to what David said. That was a pretty good introduction. We are focused on the coalition's primary focus is the getting implemented the recommendations from the student weighting, there's the pupil weighting factors report, which came out in December of 2019. And once, well, sorry. Okay, that's our focus. What we have done is hired a lobbyist who is an absolute fabulous individual who has guided us through getting S13 passed and signed by the governor, and is working with us through the summer and into next session with the task force. And whatever legislation the task force does recommend, we will ensure that it is focused again on getting the weights implemented and not focused on what many of the other legislators in the task force may be looking to do. I think that's it, David. Sorry, you kind of caught me off guard there.
Okay, apologies, Mark. I think that it's worth pointing out that there are, I hate to use this term, potentially winners and losers. Some towns which have excess, shall we say, spending capacity will lose that capacity if we end up with, shall we say, a more equitable weighting formula. Now, having said that, I have a hand from Jack and Mark. I think I'm probably going to defer to you on most of the question answering here. So go ahead and test us, please, Jack.
Oh, I'm not muted for once. The question I have, Mark, I have a fairly bottomless cynicism about study committees, but I still think the work you all are doing is admirable and has moved the ball further than I would have thought it would move. What I'd like to know is how much do we owe on the bottom line? I've put off now a couple of times bringing this up to my board, and I think the same is true of a couple other boards. I'd like to know what is reasonable to ask of our school boards to help defray some of the cost. We're the smallest of our member districts, but perhaps one of the more activists and most likely to say yes if I know what it is to ask for. So that would really be helpful to get some, swag of what we should be doing based on students or something, so we can bring it up to my board and see what we can do. And the same for the monthly newsletter that we send out as part of Grafton News, that goes to everybody in town. And we have a few people that are more financially gifted than others. Everybody, of course, in Dover is financially gifted, but by comparison, we still do okay, and we'd like to be helpful if we can.
Certainly. So we currently have 21 member boards over the organization. I'm sorry, am I muted?
No, you're good, Mark. We hear you.
So we have 21 member boards. And as David said, it's been a handful, about half, who have contributed some funds at this point. We've received everything from $1,500 up to $5,000 from member boards, all sizes. I'll give you one example. I'll give you a couple examples. River Valleys, which is made up of Wardsboro and Dover. We have just shy of 200 students and we contributed $3,000. Marlboro, which has 150 students, contributed 1,500. Brattleboro, Brattleboro, I apologize. Burlington, which is, I believe, somewhere in about 900 students, contributed 5,000. That kind of gives you the range. Basically, anything that you can contribute is going to be helpful. We are looking to pay our lobbyist through basically the end of the next session. I do not get paid. I'm a volunteer in my position. So everything that we bring in goes directly to our efforts to lobby the legislature. And I think many of us actually believe we were more successful than we expected to be also, including getting Emily Kornheiser to put an amendment on S13, which ultimately suspended the excess spending penalty for 2 years, which has been huge for many Southern Vermont districts.
There's no questions. Well, Mark, it looks like that was a satisfactory answer. So we'll come back to this next time we meet. Item 6 is new business for discussion and action. And what's on here is to set a date for return to in-person meetings. And I'm going to very strongly suggest that date will be July 14. We have discovered that Zoom has increased participation in our meetings. And it's my intent, and I believe I'm also speaking for Chris Pratt when I say this, that we very much want to continue to accommodate the sort of participation which we have enjoyed during the pandemic. Initially, I would like to have actually had this one as a public meeting. However, the more I investigated, the more I realized that we really need to have some additional critical infrastructure in place so that it's a level playing field, if you will, between those who are in person and those who are participating remotely. So I anticipate that when we meet on the 14th that we may have a few, shall we say, issues remaining, but it'll be a pretty darn good test run. And I'm very hopeful that the hybrid form of the school board meeting will continue into the future for some time. It also says down here, administrative proposals for ESSER and Ed recovery. And what I want to say on that is that we already have pretty good introduction from Chris Pratt. Board members are very much encouraged to let us know if there are specific questions you have that have arisen out of that presentation from Chris, which actually was extremely informative, even if we're not all delighted with the results. And if there are other things that you feel are important to discuss, please drop me a line, copy Chris, or drop Chris a line and copy me, and we will do the best we can to have a thoughtful and insightful meeting on July 14, which will be welcome to all comers, regardless if they're in the room or somewhere else. Okay, questions, comments on any of that before we keep moving? Okay, Priscilla.
Yes, I've got a question because we have other board meetings coming up too. And my understanding was that when the executive order went off, it was put out in the paper and put out by the Secretary of Education too, that we had to meet, we had to have an in-person place to be meeting. We can continue with Zoom as well, but we have to have that in person. So I was uncomfortable with tonight's meeting as a result, because I felt like we had to have that. And the statute says we have to have that. So are we also going to continue doing this the same with the meetings next Monday night? And where do we stand on that? Because I feel like we're violating the statute with what we're doing.
Well, Priscilla,
I'm just uncomfortable.
Okay, and I hear you clearly. I cannot answer for Rockingham Board because I'm not a member, but I am telling you that the SU Board will return to public meetings. Beyond that, I really think that you're going to have to approach your board chair from another district, that board chair, and work it out. Obviously.
Oh, we have 2 meetings.
Okay.
We have the high school and the Rockingham Board. And I just was wondering whether you were saying we don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that. So are we not going to have that? You're telling us we're not going to have that until in the July. Is that what you're telling us?
What I am telling you, Priscilla, is that this board, after this meeting, will be meeting in public. I'm hopeful that the other constituent boards will also be meeting in public as soon as possible, but I cannot direct those board chairs or our administration to do that. That's up to you. But you're heard, and I appreciate your remarks. Chris, I had a hand, and I think Jack had a hand too. So Chris first and then Jack.
Thank you, David. Board chairs for each board have to determine where they're going to have these meetings, because as of now, we're still not going to have them in the schools. And so I think that's the big hiccup right there. Board chairs have to decide where they're going to conduct their meetings.
What is the holdup with having them in schools now that the schools are no longer masked or any of that? I mean, is there a big reason for that, Chris? I also like the Zoom too, because if we're traveling, I feel like the Zoom helps those people, and it'll certainly help me as well. But I'm just trying to follow the law.
Chris, do you have a response on that, or can I recognize Jack now?
You can recognize Jack.
Okay, thank you, Jack, for your patience. You were heard, Priscilla.
The issue is valid, but the fact that schools still are not necessarily open for regular business is also an issue. We have to accommodate both the need for the policy, as I understood it in my chat, which was a few days ago, was that we would still have to have some way of assuring masking for those that are not vaccinated, or asking people to meet. The default protocol for meetings has always been that you designate a public space, which is generally considered a space under the control of the school, usually the school. And because we don't have that, we're going to need to find a space, and we're assuming it's going to be libraries, but we don't know because I haven't got a response back. So there's a lot of things we've got to still do. And I don't think that, I don't think from my chat with the AOE that anybody's going to be clapped in irons if we are still getting this worked out the first week in July. We'll do our best, but I can't guarantee that we're going to have it all together on the 29th, which our unified board is now scheduled to meet on. I just don't know if we've got the wherewithal to pull it together. And when we're done, I assume there'll be a chair in a place where everybody's invited to Zoom in. That's how I'm assuming we'll run it, but we'll see.
Thank you, Jack. Cheryl.
Just a quick comment about the use of the terminology public meeting. It seems to me, and I'm not an attorney, that all of our meetings are public, that they're warned, that the public is invited to participate. So the question now is when we can return to in-person meetings, in addition to offering the hybrid motion or option that lets people join electronically. So just to clarify, all of these meetings are public in at least the common usage of that term. The public is here and invited always.
Thank you for pointing that out, Cheryl. It's an important point. I think we have an understanding of what is required of us, and I do have a hand from Molly Bannock, who is the high school chair. So, Molly, you're recognized.
So
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not following this as tightly as some of you guys are. But if we are not allowed to use the schools, I'm pretty sure my little 10 by 12 screen porch isn't gonna carry all you guys for a school board meeting, so. And I got a brand new puppy, so it might be a lot of fun, but, I just, I guess, you know, I'm hearing everybody and I'm okay with people who want to meet, you know, face to face, but I don't have a place. So from what I'm hearing, the high school board meeting Monday is going to be just like this. And you know, David or Chris, you know, if I'm missing something here, let me know, but I don't have a place where we can go meet. I got a big lumber yard. We can go sit on units of lumber. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but I just don't know how to answer those questions. And I think that I'm next, or I'm the next meeting. So what am I going to do? I think it's a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, the AOE did not say you have to have it done by a certain time. You know, we're still meeting every rule in law of public open meeting laws. We're posting it, we're having it, public have to participate, can only move forward as quick as it's safe to do so. And right now, we're still not 100% vaccinated. There are still people out there not vaccinated. So having in schools aren't just open door policy again to the public. They're just not at this point. And until the AOE of the state takes that away, unfortunately, the schools aren't an option. But we are meeting open meeting law, we're warning it and everything else. And this is how we've been doing business for the past year. The AOE can't, or the state can't force us to do something that we're not prepared to do based on the safety and the well-being of everyone who's going to be going to those meetings.
Thank you, Chris. Deb Wright, and then I presume Jason Terry. Deb?
Right. The biggest problem I see with it, no matter if we had a place, is the technology needing to follow us to a location where we could, I mean, I'm sure I could find at least a couple of places where we could meet if we wanted to, if that was what we wanted to do. But the technology to continue to use a hybrid method, which is going to work for some people better than meeting in public, and that'll create more participation routinely with board members as well as the general public invited to meetings to see us do our business. That's a problem that definitely needs to be addressed. If we can't do it in the schools where the technology lives at this point for us, then we can't meet in public. That's the reality. If we can't do that, we'd have to have another computer set up, or all computers set up for each individual person, just as we're doing right now, or one large screen in order for everyone who meets together in one location to be heard. Miking is a problem. There's just a number of different issues going on that will make this almost an impossibility at this moment, unless we plan on spending more money on technology so that it can follow us wherever we decide to meet in person, since we can't meet in the schools. July 14th doesn't sound like a drop dead date to me. It's just a target. I think it's a target we're going to miss. That's it.
Thank you, Deb. Jason, did you want to be recognized on this topic?
Yes, please. I was wondering where you folks all had the meetings prior to COVID.
Well, I believe the answer to that, Jason, is we had them in the schools.
And why, did I miss an email? Why can't we go into the schools?
Chris, I think you're being queried as to the specific reason why we cannot use the schools for meetings.
As of right now, the state and EOE, the schools aren't open for public use at this point. And right now, not everyone's vaccinated. So we're not letting people, back into the school at this point. As soon as the state or the AOE makes that determination, then we'll put board meetings back in schools. But until then, we don't have that option right now.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Has the school been used for anything else yet, Mr. Pratt?
Nope.
That you know of?
No, we can't.
Nothing?
Not outside of school related. It's not open to the public. No. We had graduation, but that was outside, not in the building.
That's it? Just graduation, nothing else?
As far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for asking those questions, Jason. There was advice that came out of AOE last week. I think I probably characterized it to some people who are in the room tonight as kind of weak tea because it was less than definitive. However, Chris, I think that your board members here really need to have a clear understanding of what those AOE directives actually are. So if in the next day or two, you could find those and circulate them to all board members, I think we need to have a clear understanding of where AOE stands on this, because in some respects, this does contravene the directives of the Secretary of State. We're just the people caught in the middle trying to do the right thing. So we need to have a clear understanding of AOE's expectations, and we also need to have a clear understanding of the Secretary of State's pronouncements on this.
So David, I did have that conversation, and the problem is that the state's expectations don't meet up with the Agency of Education's expectations. That's what I'm getting. So there lies the rub. I've asked the question, but the two just don't match up. Is the
Okay,
state?
Chris, we hear you clearly. We need it in writing. That's what I'm telling you. So I'll work with you on that. Are there any other additional questions, comments? Because I still see hand from Deb and I still see hand from Molly. Molly, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I must not have known how to take my hand down. I'm good.
Deb, and I have a note here that says maybe Brenda would like to comment.
No, I'm just like Molly. I forgot to take my hand down.
Okay. Brenda?
So I had my hand up and I think you answered part of my questions because I wasn't understanding why we weren't able to use the school as taxpayers and board members, that the state was telling us that we were not able to use our own school. I wasn't understanding the rules on that. And I still don't totally understand, but I guess what I'm seeing is there's government involved with different parts of government telling us that we can't use our buildings. And I hear one of the concerns is vaccinations. I don't understand how that will be cleared up because I don't know that you can ever say who's all going to be vaccinated or not, which makes me concerned because how are we ever going to engage in-person anything if we're going to always, like, is there some kind of metrics that they're using and that they can actually follow to figure that out? And my other question was, some of the towns are meeting their select boards in person. Can we use their buildings because they're set up for Zoom to do their select board meetings? So why can't we use those?
Brenda, great question. And I want to apologize to you because I thought I had everyone on,
That's okay.
on one screen. I have 20 people on one screen
No, that's okay.
and one on the other. And I'm
I started doing this to you.
I just found you. I realized I didn't have you. You were the, unfortunately, the odd person out. So
No, that's quite fine. I just wasn't understanding. And so the questions kept coming and answers kept coming as it went. So by the time you got to me, I got some of the answers. So.
Well, I'm really looking forward to return to live meetings because then you can just kick me, Brenda.
No, at the SU, we were still too far apart. And that was another question I had also in the new SU building. There's probably a room for your staff meetings and whatnot, probably as large as the one that we had in the SU building before when we met as an SU board. So is that not an option either with the hybrid? Because I don't believe everybody will come anyways in person. So
size wise, I've only been in there once, Brenda.
I don't know. Yeah,
it's comparable, but even for an SU meeting, I think it would be a little bit tight. Much more comfortable room, but slightly smaller.
So what about the option for public places such as, you know, the Rockingham or the other places? And Westminster's small, but they've also met in the fire hall, which is larger.
I was going to say, Brenda, fire stations, churches, bingo halls. I think the Compass School, to name one, has a very large open space that they use for events. So I think we can find something.
Because those places were already wired for the Zoom, so it shouldn't be an extra expense in that respect. It's just a matter of coordinating it possibly. since the school isn't available to us.
Uh, Your chair is very much open to suggestions. Please, got them? I want to know, because I got 3 weeks to get us on target for the next SU meeting, and I really want to make that deadline. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else on this topic? Okay. Old unfinished business for discussion action. That's negotiations updated. We will take that into executive session. Director's comments. Megan, you have been in the room all night and have been extremely patient. Do you have a comment or multiple comments you'd like to share with us?
Sorry, sorry, David. I couldn't find my unmute button. I don't. I'm absorbing it all. I appreciate you calling on me, and I'm just observing and learning. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here. Ginger, and it's Ginger Machowski. Do I have that right?
Yes, you do. I'm just going to try to start my video here. Yes, I've just been kind of absorbing as well because I'm new to the board for Athens and Grafton, and Lynn Morgan usually is the one attending these, so I'm doing it in her place because she's away right now. So I'm just listening and learning a lot from hearing what you're all saying. But thank you for recognizing me.
Well, Ginger, thank you for being here. Molly, comment?
I am good, thank you.
Molly. Jack Breyer.
Just want to make a shout out to all my colleagues on the negotiations team. Whatever you think of the yield from our efforts, everybody was most passionate, put in the time, did the work, and we'll see what you all think of the results when we come in. But I want to commend everybody for their passion, no matter what their views of the final outcome were. So there you go.
Thanks, Jack. Cheryl.
I think I would echo what Jack just said and thank everybody. And I'd like to also commend Chris Pratt and the whole team for this recovery planning process, and ask everyone in the community to pay attention to this planning, the results that will come out for public view around really how to use these federal monies to help improve the opportunities for all children in our shared communities going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Jessa?
I am all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessa. Priscilla?
Just, I appreciate the insight from all of my fellow board members and from Chris, and just appreciate all that you do.
Thank you, Priscilla. Jason Terry?
I have nothing, David. Thank you.
Okay. Brenda?
Just a congratulations to the graduates and appreciation to all that went into that culmination to have that happen this year in regards to all of the challenges that went forth. And so congratulations.
Thanks, Brenda. Deb, right?
Yeah, I would like to echo Brenda's congrats to all of the graduates this year, and I hope they enjoy their summer and make it a useful one. And I got my second shot today. Woohoo! Expect to be sick tomorrow, maybe. So I don't know.
Good luck to you on that, Deb. It's down to me. And I am hopeful that many members here had the opportunity to read the Reformer yesterday. Also, I suspect that some of you have already had the advanced copy of my remarks here tonight, but I'm going to make them again anyway. And what I want to say is that my neighbor, Stephen Major, called me up yesterday to give me his take on negotiations. Those of us who know Stephen know it was a lengthy explanation. 10 minutes in, when he stopped to catch his breath, I told him a couple of things. first and foremost of which was that I am a believer in collective bargaining. I also unloaded my worldview on him, which is this: when John Paulson is allowed to put together the worst of the garbage that was the worst of the AAA mortgage bonds back in 2008, and then get Goldman Sachs to peddle them for him, and JP walked off with $6 billion in personal income that year, then boards and teachers beating each other up over nickels and dimes is just surreal. However, what really matters is what happens here in our communities. And it is a fact of life that there is a limit to what our communities can afford. And it is a further fact of life, and justifiably so, I believe, that the teachers' unions are out to get just as big a slice of the pie for their membership as they can. And who can blame them for that? When we as boards go to the table, we are up against the most powerful union in this state. And it's just not a level playing field, because they are supremely well-resourced and have spent many years perfecting their game plan. By comparison, we're a bunch of rubes. This time, however, it was different, because in the person of Steve Fine, we finally had someone who was a match for them and was willing to devote endless amounts of time to developing a strategy that seemingly had the support of the negotiations committee, until all of a sudden it didn't. That moment came a week ago this past Monday. As my remarks were characterized in the Reformer, we gave away the farm. As I took pains to explain to Stephen Major, Steve Fine was not out to stiff the teachers for the school year just concluding, but it was an attempt to slow down the endless bleeding caused by the compounding of new money on top of the base by offering them a one-time bonus instead. And it was a take it or leave it offer, which would expire at the end of the school year on June 30. It was, in many respects, the perfect play, because either the teachers are going to take it, to the profound consternation of their overlords at the WNEA, or they were going to lose it, causing a certain amount of short-term ill will on the part of our teachers towards the state leadership. It was the perfect play because, as I reminded Steve Major, we already had them under contract for the 21-22 school year, so they weren't too likely to walk. And by the way, I said short term because those of us who've been around for a while know full well that it wouldn't have been the first time we went a year without a current contract and made the money up to them retroactively. Instead, what we gave them was a complete and unconditional capitulation, and what we got in return was nothing except for the assurance that, having rolled us once, they could pretty much count on that the next time push comes to shove. And what we threw away was at least twofold: a paradigm change that would have had huge consequences for every other school board in this state up against an all-powerful union used to getting what they want. And unfortunately, as our colleagues on negotiations have also, I think, belatedly realized, we also threw away literally tens of thousands of dollars of pro bono legal work of the first order, which, unless we throw the towel in early and often, will now start to cost us huge amounts of both time and money for a long time to come. I am done. We are down to date of next meeting. That meeting will be held on July 14. I anticipate that that will be an in-person meeting with a remote component, which we've discussed here. And I would now like to entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of a discussion of negotiations with action likely to follow. And we will also have a discussion around a possible retirement compensation package. All right, who's got the motion for me tonight? Thank you.
I'm going to vote no.
Are you going to vote no on executive session, Jack?
I am going to vote no on executive session because a number of things were said here tonight at the last minute that weren't factual. And if we're going to have this discussion, we can have it in public. Otherwise, and I'm having a problem with that,
Well,
candidly.
Jack, the motion which has been requested is to go into executive session.
And I'm voting
Hold
no.
on a minute here. I am the chair of this board, Jack, and I will recognize you when I recognize you. I gave you the leave here to make an early objection, but first we will put a motion on the floor,
I
and
put
then
that
the
motion
board will
on the
decide whether this will be held in executive session or open session. And you certainly will have an opportunity to express your opposition to an open session discussion as soon as we have that motion on the floor. Okay, I have a hand from Priscilla. Do I have a second? Okay. I'm not seeing a second, so I guess I will offer that second on a pro forma basis. Is there discussion now under the motion to go into executive session? Jack, you are recognized.
Yes, I just want to be clear that a number of things weren't exactly accurate in that last statement, and that is either an item that we should be discussing in executive session or it isn't. We don't have a situation where one person speaks and then everybody else speaks their piece in executive session. That's not quite the way this is going to go down or should go down. And I don't mind having some of this discussed in public because the public has the right to know. What I really most object to is the inconsistency, is that we all have our piece on this subject. The negotiators who are actually there speak, or we don't. And I just think that it was a ill-advised break of protocol to do what you've done, David. I appreciate your passion, but it wasn't appropriate. And either we're going to have this discussion in public or we're not. And I'm perfectly prepared to have it in public, but it's up to Deb and my colleagues which way they want to go.
Deb, right? I have your hand.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I'll also take my hand down right now before I forget. I do not believe that this is appropriate, the use of your director's comments. I don't think I've ever heard David Clark be so abusive as he was, and both in the article and here tonight, to saying that we gave away the farm without an opportunity for complete and utter explanation about what was going on. And I guess we could do that in executive session if we vote to go into executive session. But I feel as a member of the negotiating committee, which you of course were, David, at one time, I find that very inappropriate and embarrassing. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Priscilla, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, the negotiations have always been held in executive session, so I felt it was appropriate for us to go into executive session. I was treating it simply as a director's comment, and it has been held that basically we can use the make comments under director's comments that are not responded to or done otherwise except by other people that are making director's comments. So I wasn't feeling that David's comments should have a response at that time, but that if we're discussing negotiations, that we have always done them. Executive session was where I was coming from.
Okay, thank you, Priscilla. Anyone else before we get to a vote here?
I have a question, comment.
Yes, Jessa.
When we go to executive session, as we've learned from our friends in Chester, we need to provide the specific reason, not just the little blurb about may put us at a disadvantage. So can we add that to the motion?
Well, I think what you're asking.
I'm agreeable to that.
Okay, you have a friendly amendment which has been accepted apparently, and Jessa, because you have offered that friendly amendment which the maker has accepted, would you please restate that so that we have it correct?
I don't have the specific language that would cover it. I was hoping that's something the chair would have.
Well, oftentimes the way these motions are made, Jessa, is that we are entering into executive session for a discussion of negotiations and negotiation strategy where premature public knowledge would place the board at a disadvantage. That's generally the language which is used. So if that's the language you would like to use, then there you go.
Okay.
Okay, all right. And that is your understanding, Priscilla?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Cheryl Charles.
I'd like to echo a couple of the comments I've just heard. I always respect everyone's right as a director to make public comments. I think that the chair, Mr. Clark's recent comments took a more political tone than I'm accustomed to hearing. And I think it's because of that, because of the substance of some of what, David, you just shared, it brought it into a new environment where, you know, you can hear people responding to say, gosh, I'm not sure all of that was accurate, at least from my point of view. And I'm in that camp. So it's an odd circumstance. I always respect your right as chair and everyone's right as directors to make comments. This is the first time I've ever experienced a director's comments making a political statement that others of us might question the facts of in every respect. That's personal judgment. You know, there's always a right for that. But because directors' comments don't allow for discussion afterwards, no debate, it leaves a sense in the minds and the hearts of the public of, well, that must all be true. And I'm not sure it is. And certainly in my view, I don't believe everything that was just said was accurate. So from that point of view, I would not support going into an executive session to discuss negotiations based on how you described it. I would support going in for other administrative matters, as was just described, you know, that there might be something that would be more appropriately discussed there. But at any rate, you know, thank you for the opportunity, and I don't support going into executive session based on how it was just couched.
Cheryl, you can offer an amendment to the motion, which this board can then consider. And I would be inclined to grant fairly wide latitude for that discussion. So if you would like to make that amendment and then speak to your amendment, we will do that.
I would move that the board move into executive session to discuss matters related to personnel that the discussion of which might otherwise compromise persons, or whatever the proper legal language is, but simply a simple statement around some administrative matters that involve personnel.
Okay, I'm going to ask Priscilla, as the original maker of the motion, whether she is willing to accept that as a friendly amendment. Priscilla?
It's fine.
Okay. Cheryl, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Nothing more. Thank you.
Additional discussion before we consider the amendment. Okay, we have an amendment to the motion on the floor, which is to go into executive session to discuss administrative matters which are pertinent to negotiations. Do I have that correctly, Cheryl? Please correct me if that's not right.
I thought it was pertinent to personnel matters because I'm thinking about the retirement letter in particular.
Okay, thank you. All right.
It's not the retirement letter, it's a retirement compensation discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Which may or may not. Has nothing to do with any letters.
Molly Bannock, I have your hand, and then I'll get to Jack.
So what I am hearing right now is if we go into executive session, The only thing that we are going to talk about is the retirement compensation that Priscilla has sent out that she would like everyone's opinion on. And that's all we're going into executive session for. Is that correct?
I'm going to give you a ruling on that, Molly, which is that strictly speaking, I believe you are correct. And we can come out of that executive session and either take action based on it or not. And at that point, we can consider whether we want to go back in for a discussion of negotiations or not. So I believe that yours is a correct interpretation. If that's not the belief of members of this board, the chair is querying the board. Okay, it appears that your interpretation is correct. Jason Terry.
Thanks, David. So as a member of the negotiation team, I think it would be foolish not to let all the other board members know exactly what's going on. And frankly, I don't care if it's in open or executive. I think the proper thing to do would be have it in executive. Otherwise it's just another meeting that's a waste of time, and it's been almost 2 hours. And I don't want to talk about people who aren't here anymore because they're not here anymore. So what's the point? Let's get this done. I don't want to waste any more people's time. So.
I have a hand from Jack Breyer. I'm going to hold us a little bit toward Robert's rules, and that is that under discussion, members are entitled to speak twice. So go ahead, Jack.
It is my understanding then that we will be coming, we're going to go into executive session. We're going to talk about this retirement situation. We will come back out of that and determine whether or not the offer that's been made to the teachers, which is of 1.4% of their salary for this current year, and presumably not to exceed that over the coming year, will be a matter of discussion either in public or private. We'll figure that out at the time and determine whether we think that is
Point of order, Jack, it's 1.5.
it is. What did I say?
1.4.
Oh, I just had some dental work and the list was really bad. It was supposed to be 1.5. But we'll discuss whether we want to have that chat in public or private. The item that we need to determine tonight is whether to disapprove that, and because we are literally facing a deadline that teachers face, that everybody else is, that we really need to have numbers for the fiscal people. It'd be really nice to have them tomorrow, and that's what we're trying to do.
I believe I had a hand from Priscilla, but I'm going to recognize Cheryl first. So go ahead, Cheryl.
Just to say that I'm happy with the original motion. My only point was to make it clear, at least to the general public, that because I felt that the chair, Mr. Clark's comments were of a political nature, conveyed a position that maybe not everyone agreed to, I wanted to make that comment. Having said that, I'm happy to go into executive session to discuss all the matters, negotiations, compensation for a retiree, and anything else that is properly addressed in executive session.
Priscilla, I believe you had your hand up.
I didn't, but this is going on and on. I honestly think that we should go in there and discuss whatever we have to discuss in executive session about negotiations, whatever the team has to give us for information, so that we will be able to vote on that as well. And maybe some of those issues that are not correct, according to some of the other members, need to be then discussed in public session when we come out. That's personally where I'm at with this, but it's getting muddied as we go on and on.
Well, thank you, Priscilla.
David, I really wish it hadn't happened.
Priscilla, it is the chair's determination that if Cheryl withdraws her amendment, which you accepted as a friendly amendment, that's the motion we will be back to. So I'm going to query Cheryl as to whether you would like to withdraw that amendment.
Yes, happy to.
Okay. All right. All right. So the motion is to enter into executive session to discuss retirement compensation, as well as a negotiations update from which action is likely to follow. Okay, everyone, I think who wanted to speak has had their 2 shots at it. I'm going to roll call it. Deb Wright, how do you vote?
No.
Okay. Brenda Farkas,
Yes.
Priscilla Lambert,
Yes.
Jason Terry,
Yes.
Jessa West Clark,
Yes.
Cheryl Charles. Cheryl, are you ready to vote? You're muted, Cheryl. If you can give me either a thumbs up as a yes or a thumbs down as a no, I'll know how you vote. Okay. All right. Cheryl votes yes. Jack.
I'll stay with no. I think this is, you know, a public discussion we should have.
Okay. All right. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 yeses, 2 no's. The chair is not voted. And I will note that the non-voting members in the persons of Ginger and Megan and Molly are all invited into the executive session to participate. And it's my expectation that we would invite administration in as well. So Chris, if you can get us into executive session. Okay, so 9:20, we're back out. Jack Breyer, actually, Chris, you need to turn the cameras back on, don't you?
Yeah, I think we're all set, David. The only one in the waiting room was Fact TV, and they are back.
Okay, great. All right. Jack Breyer, do you have a motion for us?
I do. It's resolved that the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union and its constituent boards approves the proposal of the negotiations committee for a 1.5% increase in salaries across the board for the year 2021, in the understanding that the following year will be a 0% increase, and that that negotiations will continue for the year 22-23.
Thank you, Jack. Do I have a second, Cheryl?
I would actually amend that motion. So no, I don't second that motion.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna. Do you have a second, Jason? Because otherwise, I'm going to offer the second so we can get this out for this.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, motion's made and seconded. Cheryl, if you're going to offer an amendment, I'm not going to ask Jack to speak to it at this point because I think it's been fairly fully explained to the board. Your amendment, please, Cheryl.
Certainly, I think to be accurate that the motion should read to it's to approve the recommendation of the board's committee for their proposal to award a 1.5% increase in salaries for the 2020-21 year, and that's it. To take out the rest. The rest has not been negotiated. It was only that 1.5% increase that came from the board's committee. That's all that's been approved to date. That's my correction to that amendment.
Jack, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I do think that I'd like it to be noted that we have a working agreement for the 0, but I take Cheryl's point And I'm fine with that. If, my colleagues are fine, sure.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I think everyone understands it. Is there any additional discussion before I call a vote?
Do we need to specify that this is in lieu of step increase?
No, I think just leave it the way it is. It just, I think Cheryl's point is, let's keep it as minimal as possible so that we give your negotiators some running room to get the rest of this done.
Okay.
Jess, there is a signed memorandum of agreement between
Right.
Sean Murphy and Deb Wright, which clearly speaks to that. So
Okay.
I think they're on pretty solid ground here. All right. Hey, Jessa, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Cheryl,
David, before we vote, can you read
would you like the
Hey,
motion again,
Pete.
Cheryl? I mean, Priscilla? Cheryl, since it was your amendment that Jack accepted, can we have it one more time, please?
What I'm stating is actually consistent with the agreement that was signed between the negotiation teams for the boards and for the union. And it was simply to award a 1.5% increase for the 2021 school year across the board, as Jack stated.
Do you have the question now, Priscilla?
Thank you.
Okay. Cheryl, how do you vote?
Yes.
Jack Breyer, how do you vote?
Yes.
Priscilla? Your vote?
Yes.
Jason Terry?
Yes.
All right. The chair votes no. However, the yeses have it. I have 6 yeses. All right. I am not aware of any additional business to come before this board. However, I do have a hand from Brenda Farkas, and possibly Brenda does. So talk to us, Brenda.
You skipped my vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had you circled. I apologize, Brenda. I had you circled here as a yes.
Two strikes this night.
But when I said it was a 6-1, I was actually counting your vote.
Okay.
It must have been automatic writing.
All right.
Okay. All right. I am not aware of any other business to come before this board, so I will declare us adjourned at 9:25. Once again, thank you all for hanging in a long meeting.